There's a family in America worth over $200 billion. You've never heard their name. They own the stores where you shop, the banks where you save, the companies that make your food, but they've stayed hidden for over 150 years. Why? Because they learned something the Rockefellers and Vanderbilts never did. How to stay rich forever without anyone knowing you exist. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal 3 things that will blow your mind. First, how this family controls 87 major American companies without a single news article about them. Second, the secret legal trick they use that makes their wealth completely invisible. And third, why they're actually richer than Elon Musk, but you'll never see them on any rich list. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documented history that's been buried for generations. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The year was 1870. Everyone was watching the Rockefellers build their oil empire. The Carnegies were making steel. The Vanderbilts were buying railroads. The whole country knew these names because these families wanted to be known. They built huge mansions. They threw fancy parties. They put their names on buildings. But there was another family doing something completely different, the Cargill family. And they made a choice that would change American wealth forever. They decided to disappear. William Wallace Cargill started with a single grain storage business in Iowa. Nothing special. But he understood something the other rich families didn't. The more famous you become, the more enemies you make. The more your name appears in newspapers, the more the government watches you. The more people know about your money, the more they want to take it. So the Cargills built their empire in the shadows. No interviews, no magazine covers, no public stock offerings. They stayed private, completely private. And this decision made them richer than almost anyone in American history. Today, Cargill Inc. is the largest privately held company in America. It employs 155,000 people across 70 countries. It makes $177 billion every single year. That's more than Nike, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's combined. 14 family members are billionaires right now. Not millionaires, billionaires, with a B. But here's what's really crazy. Most Americans have no idea this company exists. You've probably bought their products 100 times. You just didn't know it. Now here's where things get really interesting. The Cargill family doesn't just own one business. They own pieces of everything you touch every single day. And they've hidden it using a strategy so brilliant that even business schools don't teach it. Let me break this down for you. When you go to the grocery store and buy chicken, there's an 80% chance Cargill processed that meat. When you eat chocolate, Cargill probably supplied the cocoa. When you use salt, Cargill mined it. When you buy beef, pork, eggs, or turkey, Cargill was involved somewhere in the supply chain, but you'll never see their name on a single package. They operate as what's called a B2B company. That means business to business. They don't sell to you. They sell to the companies that sell to you. It's the perfect invisibility cloak. They're hiding in plain sight. Here's a real example. You know those chicken nuggets at McDonald's? Cargill supplies the chicken. But McDonald's is the name you see. The profits? They go to both companies, but only McDonald's gets the attention. Only McDonald's deals with angry customers or protests or media questions. Cargill just collects the money and stays quiet. They do this in 70 different industries. Agriculture, obviously, but also financial trading, steel production, transportation, energy, animal nutrition, food ingredients, and even risk management services. They're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The numbers are absolutely insane. Cargill moves 25% of all grain exports in the United States. One company. 1/4 of all grain leaving America. They handle 22% of the U.S. meat supply. They're one of the largest salt producers on Earth. They trade more commodities than almost any other company in the world. But wait, there's more. The family also owns massive stakes in other private companies through trusts and holding corporations. They've invested billions in real estate, technology startups, and private equity funds. All invisible, all protected from public records. By staying private, they avoid something public companies hate: quarterly earnings reports. They don't have to tell anyone how much money they make. They don't have shareholders demanding bigger profits every 3 months. They can think long-term, make decisions that take 20 or 30 years to pay off. And they never have to explain themselves to anyone. This gives them a huge advantage. While public companies panic about stock prices, Cargill quietly buys up competitors during economic crashes. When everyone else is scared, they're shopping. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. The real secret isn't just that Cargill stays private. It's how they've structured their family wealth to last forever. And this is where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Most rich families lose everything by the third generation. There's even a saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. The first generation builds the fortune. The second generation maintains it. The third generation blows it all. It happens over and over throughout history. The Vanderbilts? Almost broke by the third generation. The Guggenheims? Fortune split into tiny pieces. The Astors? Barely hanging on. Even the Rockefellers had to work hard to keep their wealth from disappearing completely. But the Cargills figured out the secret. And it's actually simple once you understand it. They don't treat the business like something they own. They treat it like something they serve. Every family member who wants to work at Cargill has to prove themselves. No automatic executive positions just because your last name is Cargill. You start at the bottom. You learn the business. You earn your place. If you're not good enough, you stay a shareholder, but you don't run anything. This keeps incompetent family members from destroying the company. It's happened to so many wealthy families. One dumb grandson gets control and makes terrible decisions, and suddenly a 100-year fortune is gone. The Cargills solved this problem from day one. But there's another layer to this strategy that's even more brilliant. The family's shares are held in a trust structure that's designed to last centuries. When a family member dies, their shares don't just go to their kids in a simple inheritance. Instead, the shares go into generation-skipping trusts that protect the wealth from estate taxes, divorces, lawsuits, and bad decisions. Let me explain why this matters. Normal rich people give their money to their kids. The government taxes that transfer at 40%. Then when those kids die, the government taxes it again at 40%. 2 generations, and the government has taken 64% of the original fortune. That's how wealth disappears. The Cargills don't do that. They use trusts that skip generations. The wealth goes into a legal structure that can last 90 years or more in some states. During that time, family members can benefit from the money, but they don't own it directly. Nobody can sue them for it. Ex-spouses can't claim it in divorces. Creditors can't touch it. And the estate tax only hits once every 90 years instead of every 30 years. This is completely legal. But almost nobody does it this way because it requires giving up control. Most rich people want to control every dollar until they die. They can't let go. The Cargills understood that letting go of control actually preserves wealth better than holding tight. There's another fascinating element to their strategy. They've spread the ownership across about 100 family members. Nobody owns more than 10% of the company. This prevents family fights from destroying everything. When ownership is concentrated in one person or one branch of the family, arguments get ugly. People sue each other. Companies get torn apart. But when 100 people each own a small piece, cooperation is the only option. You have to work together. You have to compromise. You have to think about the whole family, not just yourself. It's democratic wealth, built to survive disagreements. The Cargills also reinvest almost all their profits back into the business. While other billionaires buy yachts and sports teams and space rockets, Cargill puts its money into new factories, new technology, and new markets. The company grows bigger every single year. The family fortune multiplies while staying completely invisible. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. Here's the part that nobody talks about. The part that explains why this family is so powerful. The Cargills don't just control food and agriculture. They control information about food and agriculture. And that gives them power that goes way beyond money. Think about it this way. Cargill knows exactly how much grain exists in the world at any moment. They know which countries are running out of food. They know which crops are failing before anyone else does. They know when droughts will cause price spikes. They see the global food supply like you see your Netflix queue. This information is worth billions, maybe trillions, and it gives them an advantage that's almost impossible to beat. Here's a real example of how this works. In 2008, there was a global food crisis. Rice prices tripled. Wheat prices doubled. People rioted in the streets of 30 countries. Governments fell. It was chaos. But Cargill saw it coming months earlier. They knew the crop yields. They knew the supply chains. They knew exactly when prices would explode. So they positioned themselves perfectly. They made billions while the rest of the world panicked. Now, they didn't cause the crisis. That's important to understand. Weather and biofuels and other factors caused the shortage. But Cargill knew about it before governments did, before the UN did, before anyone could react. This happens in smaller ways every single day. Cargill's traders know more about commodity prices than any government agency. They know more about global food security than most countries' agriculture departments. They have satellites monitoring crops. They have people on the ground in every major farming region. They have data that nobody else can access. And because they're private, they don't have to share what they know. Public companies have to disclose information. They have to file reports. They have to be transparent. But Cargill, they can keep secrets. They can see opportunities that others miss. They can move fast without anyone knowing what they're doing. This information advantage has made them powerful in ways that go beyond business. They advise governments. They influence food policy. They sit at the table when world leaders discuss hunger and climate change and agricultural development, not because anyone elected them, but because they know things nobody else knows. Here's something that will blow your mind. During World War II, Cargill helped the U.S. government manage food supplies for the war effort. During the Cold War, they were involved in grain sales to the Soviet Union that had major political implications. During famines in Africa and Asia, they've been part of the relief efforts. They're connected to major historical events, but they're never in the history books. The family has relationships with powerful people across the world: presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, CEOs. But they meet in private. They don't do photo ops. They don't give speeches at conferences. They operate in a world most of us never see. And here's the kicker. Because they've stayed quiet for so long, they've avoided the backlash that hit other wealthy families. Nobody protests outside Cargill family homes. Nobody writes angry articles about them. Nobody puts their faces on magazine covers with critical headlines. They've escaped the price of fame that every other billionaire pays. Elon Musk deals with constant criticism. Jeff Bezos gets attacked for everything Amazon does. The Walton family faces protests about Walmart's labor practices. But the Cargills? They're invisible. They've built the perfect fortress of privacy around their fortune. So what does all this mean for us today? The Cargill story reveals something important about wealth in America. The richest families aren't the ones you read about. They're the ones you've never heard of. And that's not an accident. That's a strategy. Think about what this means for a second. Everything you know about rich people comes from public information: Forbes lists, magazine articles, Instagram posts, TV shows about billionaires. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real wealth is hidden beneath the surface. There are probably dozens of families like the Cargills, maybe hundreds. Families who own private companies worth billions. Families who've stayed quiet for generations. Families who've figured out that privacy is the ultimate luxury. This changes how we should think about wealth inequality. When people talk about the richest Americans, they're only counting public wealth: stock holdings, real estate records, court documents. But private wealth is invisible. Nobody knows how much exists. Nobody can count what they can't see. The Cargills show us that the key to keeping wealth forever is pretty simple. Stay private. Reinvest profits. Spread ownership across the family. Avoid publicity. Think long-term. It's not complicated, but it requires discipline that most people don't have. Most people who get rich want everyone to know about it. They want the mansion, the yacht, the private jet, the magazine covers, the respect, the envy, the attention. That's human nature. We want recognition for our success. But the Cargills understood something deeper. Attention brings problems. Fame brings enemies. Publicity brings regulation. The more people know about your money, the more they want to take it. Through taxes, through lawsuits, through business competition, through theft. So they built walls of privacy. They created structures that protect their wealth from every possible threat. And they've maintained those structures for 150 years. This has huge implications for regular people trying to build wealth. You don't need to be a billionaire to use these strategies. The principles work at any level. Keep your success private. Don't brag about your money. Don't post about your investments on social media. Don't tell everyone what you're earning. The more invisible you are, the fewer people will try to take what you've built. Reinvest your profits. Don't blow your money on things that lose value. Put it back into assets that grow. Real estate, businesses, investments. Let compound growth do the work. Think long-term. Don't try to get rich quick. Build something that lasts. Make decisions for decades, not months. The Cargills have stayed wealthy for 150 years because they think in centuries. Spread risk across multiple investments. Don't put everything in one place. The Cargills own 70 different types of businesses. If one fails, 69 others keep going. Teach your kids about money. The Cargills make family members learn the business from the ground up. They don't hand out money without responsibility. They create a culture where wealth is respected, not wasted. But there's a darker side to this story too. When wealth becomes this concentrated and this invisible, democracy suffers. The Cargills have enormous influence over food policy, environmental regulations, and agricultural subsidies, but voters don't know about it. Citizens can't hold them accountable. They operate beyond public scrutiny. This raises serious questions. Should any family have this much power over something as basic as food? Should private companies be allowed to control critical industries without transparency? Should billionaires influence government policy from the shadows? There are no easy answers. The Cargills aren't evil. They're not breaking laws. They're just playing the game better than everyone else. But maybe the game itself needs to change. Maybe there should be more transparency requirements for companies this large. Maybe private companies should face the same disclosure rules as public ones. Or maybe not. Maybe privacy is a right that shouldn't be taken away just because you're successful. Maybe forcing transparency would punish the families who played smart and reward the ones who made dumb decisions. These are the conversations we need to have. Because the Cargill story isn't just about one family. It's about how wealth and power work in America. It's about who controls our food, our economy, and our future. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know. Here's the twist that makes this entire story even crazier. The Cargills aren't the only family doing this. They're just the biggest example. There are other massive family fortunes hiding in plain sight right now. The Mars family owns the candy company. They're worth over $140 billion. Also completely private. Also invisible. The Cox family owns cable and media companies. Worth $60 billion. Private. The Johnson family owns cleaning products and other businesses. Worth $46 billion. Also private. See the pattern? The richest families in America aren't the ones you know. They're the ones who made sure you'd never know them. And here's what nobody's talking about. This trend is growing. More wealthy families are taking their companies private. They're buying back shares from the stock market. They're removing themselves from public view. They're learning from the Cargills. In the past 20 years, thousands of public companies have gone private. Billionaires are realizing that privacy is worth more than the money they could raise from public investors. The transparency costs too much. The quarterly pressure is too stressful. The media attention brings too many problems. So they're disappearing. Just like the Cargills did 150 years ago. This means the wealth gap is probably way bigger than anyone realizes. Official statistics only count what they can measure. But if the richest families are hiding their money in private companies and trusts, the real numbers could be double or triple what we think. The Cargill story teaches us the most important lesson about wealth. The best way to keep money is to make sure nobody knows you have it. Fame and fortune don't mix. Publicity and privacy are opposites. You can be rich or you can be famous. But it's really hard to be both for more than one generation. Remember when we started? I told you the Cargills learned something the Vanderbilts never did? This is it. They learned that staying hidden is the ultimate power move. They learned that silence protects wealth better than any law or security system. They learned that the moment you become famous, you start losing. The Vanderbilts built giant mansions that everyone could see. Those mansions are now museums. The wealth is gone. The Rockefellers put their name on buildings and foundations. Their fortune has been split into hundreds of pieces across distant relatives. The Carnegies gave away most of their money trying to improve their reputation. But the Cargills? They're still here, still growing, still invisible, still building a fortune that might last another 150 years. So the next time you're at the grocery store, look at the food on the shelves. Remember that someone owns every step of the process that got it there. Someone made money from the farm to the package to the truck to the store. And chances are that someone is a member of a family you've never heard of. That's the forbidden story of America's richest untold millionaire lineage. Not a lineage of fame and monuments and magazine covers, but a lineage of silence, strategy, and generational wealth that refuses to die. The Cargills built an empire by becoming invisible. And in doing so, they might have figured out the secret to staying rich forever. If this story shocked you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe, because there are dozens more hidden billionaire families we're going to expose in future videos. The question is, now that you know the truth, what are you going to do with it?